Today presentation is part of our free educational series that we have here at Ascender. We have 2 events twice a month where we bring in experts that donate their time, that are eager to come here, connect with you, and share best practices, share insights and learnings that they have gathered throughout their years of experience. So I am very excited today to welcome Diamonte Walker, Deputy Executive Director of the Urban Redevelopment Authority of the City of Pittsburgh. Diamante is a leader in our community, and she has years of experience in both the private and the public sector. When I asked Diamante if she could join us, she said yes right away, and I am really happy to be here, to really get to learn a little bit more from her experience, and then for us to walk away feeling that that we can connect with such a leader like Diamante, and really have an honest conversation about what it means to be a leader, and especially during these times that have been more challenging than ever before. So welcome, Diamante, and if you don't mind starting us off with also sharing a little bit about yourself, in your own words. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'm really excited for the rest of the hour with you.
Very excited to be here, Anya. Thank you so much to you, Natalia, and all of the Ascender staff who've invited me today. This is really wonderful. I love talking to our community about leadership. I'm very passionate about leadership and good governance. So I will talk a little bit more about myself in the presentation. But I did see a few folks that I actually know on the Zoom, and that I've actually worked with. Marlene Landrum. I've seen Nancy Furby. Some of my colleagues at the URA. I think I saw Dana Bohens and Daniel Grantham. And so I just want to thank you guys for joining today, and really look forward to having this discussion. Want to give a special thanks to Daniel, who helped to prepare today's presentation. He is very highly skilled, and I'll talk a little bit about that. He is my special assistant, but very much is a leader in his space, in the administrative space, and so very thankful to have him here as my partner. And so I will go ahead and get started without further ado. So this presentation is about showing up, how to be a leader every day. Again, Anya, I want to thank you for extending the invitation. Very happy to be here. So today's agenda, I'll give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about. This is meant to be engaging, so if you feel like you need to interrupt me, I've told the team that they can do that. I did leave time at the end for Q&A and to have a dialogue, but I'll talk a little, the obligatory bio slide, tell you a little bit about myself, my career path from management to leadership. I'm going to talk a little bit about something called crucibles and how that can help you develop your why as a leader, and then how to cultivate the leadership mindset, the total leader mindset. That's really how I see the world, and kind of the leadership principle that I sort of, adhere to in my practice. And then we're going to take a journey through the total leader's labyrinth. So I want to talk a little bit about that metaphor, and how I feel like a lot of times leading every day means going into a labyrinth or a maze that shifts every single day, and you've got to have the right tools to navigate and find your way. And then at the end, I'm going to allow you to ask me anything. So this is the obligatory bio slide. This is a little bit about me, and I'm not going to read all the bullet points there because you guys can read, but the thing that I want to hone in on is probably the last quadrant there, which is what matters most to me. I'm a wife, a mother, and a lifelong Hill District resident, very proud of the community that I come from. I'm the first Black woman director in the URA's 74-year history. That is no credit to me. I am certainly not the first competent Black woman to grace its doors. I think it's just the moment that we are in, and I am very proud of the shoulders that I stand on. And the most important thing here will be that I made my mother proud. So my mother's very proud of me, and so that makes me, just smile inside knowing that I've brought her a sense of joy by the way that I've lived my life and progressed in my career. And so, as mentioned, I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Urban Redevelopment Authority. So that is a picture of myself and my boss there. And the photo credit here goes to Dana Bohens, who is on the call. She is a wonderful photographer, and I think she really captured the essence of our working dynamic there. And so in my job, I'm responsible for helping to drive strategy and vision at the URA. I handle all of our operations and a lot of the team development and leadership capacities that we're developing in the organization. So the one thing that I want to say is that you're going to hear me talk a lot about, what I've done and, some of the way that I see things, but please note that this is not made possible without a dynamic team. And I say that I can show up and lead the way that I lead because of the folks who work alongside me. I don't ever use the term that they work for me. They don't work for me. They work for the URA on behalf of the city. We work together and we are very much colleagues. And so transitioning to talking about the difference between management and leadership, because these things are sometimes conflated, but they are very unique and very different. And I think that leaders have to understand the difference in order to be effective. So I'm going to talk about how I made the leap from management to leadership. And so as Anya stated, I have about 20 years of experience. I'm telling my age there, but it's true. I started off in the corporate sector for about 15 years, spent most of my career in the for-profit education sector. So very, very, very much about, making money. And it was not really a mission-focused career at that time. Spent about 2 years in the nonprofit sector, did work at the Hill District Community Development Corporation for about 2 years, and then made the transition to the public sector, coming to the URA as the MWBE program officer at the time, and then kind of, I guess leading in such a way that allowed me to reach the heights to where I am today. That was a 3-year journey. And so the competencies that I've developed in each sector, I've outlined them here. Again, I'm not going to read everything, but there are a few skill sets that I picked up on in each sector. So learning how to think in systems and doing data analysis and problem solving and business intelligence. I really got that from the corporate sector. In the nonprofit sector, I mean, this was really where I think I did a lot of my growth and development and made that transition from management to leadership by developing networks, doing some planning and strategy, service and policy advocacy, marketing outreach and collaboration. Worked very closely with Marlene Landrum, who's on the call here. Had a wonderful working relationship with her. She's another leader that I admire in the community development space. And in the public sector, this has really been sort of brass tacks, learning about public financing tools, economic development strategies and business, housing and workforce, legislative, public and government affairs, and then public speaking, facilitation, and planning. And so I want to stress that the difference between management and leadership, it's a very important one. It's a paradigm, and one is not better than the other. You have to understand how to create a confluence so that these things work together in a complementary manner. Management means that people do what you say because it's a requirement. They need to be competent in their jobs. They can't be subordinate. You ask them to do something, they need to do it. Leadership takes it to another level, and that means that they're delivering on the mission and vision because they feel inspired to do it. So your charge as a leader is to make sure that you are inspiring and activating the gifts and skill sets within your team so that when you have a requirement, it's not drudgery to do it. Not everything is rainbows and sunshine. Some things you just do because you have to. But at the end of the day, most people want to feel connected to the mission and the vision. And so in order to be able to make that leap from management to leadership, you have to cultivate the total leader's mindset. And so I talked earlier about how I see this as a labyrinth that you have to navigate. And in the book and so all of this is going to be about what I read and how I, develop, do my professional development. And so you're going to see a lot of books talked about within this presentation. And we're happy to share this with you if you want to take a look at some of these items that I've been reading. But the total leadership competencies, this is authenticity, being a visionary leader, cultural, relational, really connecting with people, quality and capacity. Your work has to be quality, systems and service, and then last but not least, communication. And so Schwann and Spady have built a whole, paradigm around how to lead in the age of empowerment. People want to feel empowered. They don't want command and control leadership. They want you to be competent, but they also want to build their own competencies. So into the labyrinth we go. This is a little bit about how I'm leading every day, the things that I read, how I've, kind of worked with the team at the URA to transform what I believe was an agency that did excellent work, but really hadn't unlocked its fullest potential. And we're in that moment. So I'm going to talk about this in terms of the URA almost being like a public business, like a public enterprise. We'll talk a little bit about what we do for businesses, but this is really about how, as a leader, I've come in and sort of changed and shifted the trajectory of the business. So the first place in the maze is authenticity. So I talked about crucibles. Well, what is a crucible? Warren Bennett says that a crucible is an essential element in the process of becoming a leader. If you think about a crucible in literal terms, it's a heat-resistant container that's used to melt down and purify metal, copper, iron, gold, and I would add that it is used to refine and develop leaders. And so the crucible for me, my crucible is the historic Hill District, the neighborhood that I grew up in. If you look at the headlines, there are a lot of things you might believe about the Hill District, and maybe some of those things are true, but growing up in the neighborhood, I've been able to see its potential and its promise, and it's made me who I am. So I always tell people, hey, if you like me, it's probably because I'm from the Hill District. If you don't like me, it's probably because I'm from the Hill District. Both things are mutually true. And so I'm sharing some things today that I've not shared with a lot of people. A lot of people may not know some of these things about me, but Anya asked, and I want to talk about authenticity. So here it goes. This is my beautiful mother here, a picture of her with me as a baby. And that's my brother there on the other side. And he's about 5 years younger than me. And so you'll see a common thread here, my brother and I, pretty much all throughout my life. If you look at the one picture there, that was my first demonstration of leadership. I shaved off my eyebrows because I just didn't think that they were essential. I call it leadership. My mother called it defiance. I don't know that I've changed much today, but there's that. That's another picture with my brother and my sister and I. Again, just growing up in my childhood, my brother and I being very, 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 very close. And in 2011, my brother lost his life, and that perpetually changed me. I was at an inflection point where I really had to make a decision about what I was going to do with my life to ensure that his life mattered. And so if you want to know why I serve and why I'm driven to do the things that I do, what's driving me is the desire to remember him by serving in a way that makes our communities better than the one that he didn't survive. So I am blessed and privileged to be here today. He is with me in memory and spirit. And so if you want to know what motivates me and what drives me, it is looking at that face and knowing that we can create communities that are better than the one, again, that he didn't survive. And so being able to take a very painful moment, something that could really crush your spirit, and in a lot of ways, it changed and transformed me. Like I said, it's a crucible. That is, you can look to the book True North by Bill George. This is about understanding how to avoid the pitfalls of leadership and using your crucible moments to transform yourself so that you have a clear understanding of what's compelling you to lead. This is how you're going to stay rooted when things get hard, when things get difficult, when you're just not feeling it anymore. You want to have your true north to remind you of why you do what you do each and every day. And so on to visionary leadership. I recommend that all leaders have a personal leadership statement. This is just really, again, to center yourself and to understand and be able to communicate why you do what you do. So my leadership statement is that my intention is to always lead in a way that positively impacts people, places, and systems that I engage with, one authentic encounter at a time. So that's my statement. I highly encourage you guys to start to think about and develop one for yourself. And then when you think about visionary leadership, it's really the ability to define and prepare for what's next. So I did an interview a few months ago, actually in January before COVID hit. And I was asked by the Pittsburgh Quarterly for a series called Pittsburgh Tomorrow, like, what is Pittsburgh going to look like in the future? And so if you want to hear that podcast, it's on the internet. You should be able to Google it and find it. But one of the things that I said is that, one of the things we're challenged with in Pittsburgh is that when we were talking about this, Pittsburgh becoming the epicenter of ads, mads, and tech, nobody really believed it. So nobody fully prepared certain communities to be able to make that adaptation and that adjustment. And so my whole thing is that I believe that Pittsburgh is going to do the next big thing, the next great thing. And if we're going to do that, we have to make sure that we're preparing everybody and bringing everybody along. And that is really what my work has been about at the URA. And then I'll also talk a little bit about being able to use vision to prepare for things that maybe you can't fully see, because we all see through a mirror dimly, but you need to be able to rationalize and understand and prepare for things. If you're leading, because people are going to depend on you in moments of crisis. And absolutely with COVID, we found ourselves in the middle of a crisis. And some of the things that I was able to do with our executive director helped to prepare the URA to make that transition. So the next area in the maze is about cultural relational leadership. And this is how we connect and relate to one another. So my personal leadership practice is that people come first, like the people are the point. And if we are not thinking and centering people when we're leading, it's really just self-aggrandizement. And so I want to use my platform to amplify community voice. to really rethink economic development tools and instruments, and to evaluate what's already working in communities. Communities don't need me as a leader to come in and tell them what's best for them. What they really need is for somebody to listen and to figure out how to elevate what's already working. So and then the extension of that for us is valuing the people in the organization that have to do this work. You'll see a lot of folks here in the audience in this picture are URA staff members that are out at 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening listening to communities. And that is not something that they have to do. They do that because they want to serve, and they also believe in putting people first. So that notion of putting people first is not only for communities or external audiences, it's not authentic if it's not happening in the office. And so one of the things that I've really strived to do, and just to let you guys know, I tried not to do this presentation all about how I see myself. I certainly did ask some of my direct reports at the URA to contribute to this and to tell me what they perceive in my leadership, just to make sure that it rings true. And so a lot of folks, so recognizing the importance of staff contributions at all levels, regardless of title, regardless of pedigree, all people have value. Everybody brings something to the table, and it's our jobs as leaders to make space for that. Convening a cross-section of expertise. No one person knows it all, no one group knows it all, and really pulling folks in to make sure that all voices are heard. I think it's very important to highlight successes and wins. We work in an industry where things go wrong all the time, but I try to make space and time, even though things are crazy busy, to look at the successes and wins of the team, and then creating a workplace culture where new leaders can emerge and grow. It is great to be the first Black director, female director of the URA, but if I'm the last, then I haven't done my job. The goal is to create and cultivate new leaders, because people to me really are what matter most. And so a book that I've looked to help with some of this has been it's Humanocracy. And so I feel like I'm in the battle against bureaucracy, systems and rules that are designed to figure out how not to do something. And instead, we want to focus on how do we embolden our people so we can do things, big things, bold things. And so, my goal has been to unleash the talent and entrepreneurialism of the staff. I'm very entrepreneurialist, even though I'm in the public sector. At the end of the day, the URA is the public's business. And so we want staff that are trying to figure out how to grow both on our margins and within our mission. And so that requires deepening our connections and relationships with our stakeholders internally and externally, and then celebrating change as an opportunity to grow, develop, and evolve. Change is very frightening. The URA has gone through a huge amount of change in a very short period of time, and that was not easy for everybody. And every single moment was not, my brightest moment or my shining moment. But the thing is that you keep evolving, you keep working on it, and you keep growing and developing. So on to quality and capacity. So in becoming the URA's deputy executive director, for a short period in time, I served as the interim executive director to prime the organization for new leadership. We wanted fresh eyes on a very old system. And so the board, did a very thorough vetting and interview process, and brought Mr. Greg Flissrum to the URA from Kansas City. He is the right leader for the URA at this moment, and I'm very proud to serve with him. But in preparing for his onboarding, a few things had to happen, big things. I oversaw the implementation of a new organizational strategy, which talked about how to reframe the URA to meet the 21st century needs of our city. Not an easy thing to do. And at the same time, moving into a more modern space. So as we've tried to become a more modern organization, we moved from 200 Broad Street, and if you've been in that building, you've seen the condition of that building, into sort of Class A office space on the 9th floor there. That's a picture of the building. That's a picture of the final report. That report is available on the website if you are interested in taking a look at it. But the whole goal here was to establish a new org structure to elevate quality and competence within the organization. A lot of qualified, highly competent folks, but we weren't looking at everybody in the organization and really fully unleashing all of that talent. And the goal here is to activate the mission and vision as a part of a refresh. And so, again, that's a picture of myself and Greg and a few members of our board and Mayor Peduto, who appointed me as the deputy executive director to serve with the executive director as a joint management team to oversee the shift in the URA's transition from public administration to public enterprise. And so for this, what I've really looked to are two books, John C. Maxwell's 5 Levels of Leadership. Books changed my life. And then the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. And so Collins, essentially says that great organizations have to have the right people on the bus to fulfill the mission. You got to have the right staff. You got to have the right skill sets. Not everybody's going to be a good fit for the URA, and the URA is not going to be a good fit for everybody. We really want the right folks on the bus. And what I think is most important, and what I stress to the colleagues that I work with, especially those in a senior leadership position, is that positional power is the lowest form of power. To have the fancy title and the fancy pedigree, that is like the baseline of power. Real power comes from empowering others. And a level 5 leader, and I'm not attesting that I'm a level 5 leader, but I certainly seek to do that, is the ability to create other leaders at every single level in the organization. Folks should be at the top of their game. If they're an administrative assistant, if they're a manager, if they're an officer, they need to be at the top of their game in leading, whether it's leading people or leading processes and procedures. And so on to systems and service. So if you wanted to, I think of this as transformation by disruption. So some of what's happened at the URA has really become necessitated by the advent of COVID-19. We had this really fancy plan. It's all codified in that little booklet that I showed you about what we were going to do and when we were going to do it. And nature had a different idea. And so you don't want to waste a crisis. You want to use every moment to figure out how you can really show up for your people and do the things that need done. So in June 2019, we were really preparing the organization for the arrival of a new executive director to form this joint management team. The new ED arrived in January, and in March 2020, 8 weeks into that new leadership team, COVID-19 happened. And so we had already been talking for months about restructuring the organization and becoming this new URA. And a lot of folks felt like, well, we shouldn't do anything now. Like we should just kind of stop and atrophy because it's not safe to do anything. COVID-19 is too uncertain. And, I took a bit of a different position and felt like we needed to double down. I know a lot of folks were talking about pivot, pivot, pivot. And my whole thing was that we already know what needed to happen. Now we need to accelerate that change. We are in unprecedented times. Leaders are not going to have, time to dawdle and to be, there's already uncertainty. People don't need more uncertainty coming from their leaders. So we had to take a few bold, deliberative actions to make sure that our staff, one, they were physically safe, mentally safe, and, had some level of security during those times of uncertainty. So on March 17th, we started pivoting to completely remote work. I'm going to talk a little bit about why that was a challenge and why that's not as easy as it sounds for an organization like the URA. And we also had to figure out, how do we continue providing a service to the public that is in crisis? And we're going through a pandemic. Businesses are shutting down. What are we supposed to do? And so one of the things that I remember, and this is why I talk about leading at every level, is I had a loan officer come into my office and say, Diamonte, businesses are scared right now. And, because I was thinking about staff, and she said, I'm getting calls from business owners and they are really upset. What is the URA going to do? And I said, well, you tell me what you think the URA should be doing, and I'm going to support you 110% in making that happen. And that was really the impetus for our emergency loan fund program, is that employee coming and saying, hey, we've got to start thinking about this and show up for our business community. So the questions that we had to contend with were, how will we help businesses and residents impacted by the pandemic? How are we going to hold our public meetings? How do we implement this game-changing organizational restructure when we're going to all be completely remote? And how do we keep employees engaged and excited? These are the things that we had to think about while thinking about our own, need to do all the things you see over there on the right-hand side of the screen, which is wearing our masks, practicing social distancing at the time, looking for signs and signals of not feeling well, and continuing to practice good personal and workplace hygiene. And so, again, this is where leadership beyond my positional power comes into play, because if you look at this document here, the URA COVID Action Team, this is a convening of about maybe 5 or 6 folks in the URA at every different level. And my assistant, Daniel Grantham, is a part of that committee and actually developed this document. And it's stellar, it's excellent. It's been our North Star as we've been navigating through this. And so what I really tried to focus on is how to bring order and focus to the issues and matters that were within the realm of control. Leaders need to immediately focus on what can you control, how do you get that stabilized so you can start to better manage the things that are going to be beyond your control. It's been very important to communicate clearly and to listen often, listen twice as much as you're talking or thinking. I recognize that I have some really good ideas. I think I'm a pretty smart person, but I'll tell you that, the folks around me are smarter than I am, and that it is always important to be listening to them and to make sure that their voices are heard and their ideas are advanced, because if you're working in a silo and you're only thinking about the way that you see the world, you're going to miss something. You have to acknowledge the fear, the panic, and the uncertainty in everyone. Don't tell people that it's all in their heads. Like, it's real, we're all feeling it, but don't give in to it, don't cede to it. Practicing firm flexibility without compromising accountability. We sent 95 people home to work remotely, and I expected people to deliver that work the way they would have if we were all in our building. We did not compromise on accountability, but we were flexible and understanding as people needed to make those changes. That's about adjusting and adapting with competence. Prioritizing and modeling the mental, physical, and emotional safety needs of all employees. They need to see me taking care of myself in order for them to take care of themselves, and vice versa. And then making space for the experts to lead. Again, sort of forming this COVID action team and saying, you guys know better than I do. Send me an email every week and tell me what you think that we should be doing. And my job is to make sure that that's implemented and that's carried out. And then assure your people, reassure your people, and also don't pause on investing in your people while going through crisis. This is a wonderful time to invest in the skill sets of folks, because you don't know when you're going to need to pull somebody off the bench. And so I talked a little bit about our organizational restructuring. Again, I'm not going to read all of these, but really trying to figure out how to become an organization that was, needing to help small businesses, needing to deal with some of the civic unrest that we were seeing in our communities, given the levels of harm that were happening towards Black people in particular. What is the URA's role in that? And then, really starting to focus on recovery. We're not going to always be, at the height of concern around COVID. Excuse me. And so this over here is how we sort of organized, pardon me, how we sort of reorganized the organization. We had 11 departments. We synthesized those into 4. We were not going to be able to maintain 11 departments all remote. And so coming out of that exercise of really, how are we going to lean our organization? How are we going to figure out what our new why is? So before, you would hear the URA say, we increase the city's tax base. Well, now we've changed that. We work on the city's economic development goals and think about how everybody fits within that. Our focus is on creating more housing that's affordable to the average Pittsburgher, entrepreneurship, inclusive growth, expanding neighborhoods and main streets, and developing a talented workforce that's equipped with the skills of the future. And on March 17th, that's how we had to do it. So you may think this is hyperbole, that we were on AOL and stacks of paper, but it's not too far from the truth. We were all tethered to that I had a laptop, but most staff were tethered to very old systems, very old networks. There was no way that we were going to be able to go home and be remote and survive and still show up for our city. And so March 19th, you can see there, I had already started working in December to try to turn the URA into a more digitally cohesive environment. We had to put a rush on those laptops. Excuse me. And then transition to Zoom, OneDrive, and Jotform. So going from this in 2 days took a lot of preparation and preliminary planning, because in December I said, going into 2020, we don't know what's going to happen at the URA. We don't know. We want to be prepared for anything. Could not have in any way, shape, or form imagined COVID, but could certainly try to figure out what will happen if staff is not equipped, if we don't have access to our building. And so the team worked together to try to move us to the cloud and get us on a better system. Excuse me. I'm sitting right next to an air conditioner, which I should not have done, so I apologize. And being systems adapted versus systems interrupted. So the system was interrupted all over the world. And so, but business must go on, the show must go on. So how can leaders ensure that they're prepared to do that? So one of the things that we had to do, we have a duty to the public. We have to maintain transparency, which means we had to run virtual board meetings all from our homes, unprecedented in the history of the URA. So you can see our board members there in a room, nobody socially distanced. That was well before COVID-19, to where you see above our board chair on Zoom starting to convene the meeting. And so while we've been, remote, I feel like we've been able to accelerate and do work that we might not have imagined doing without COVID-19. We've deployed nearly $5 million in economic relief to small businesses, the majority of them being minority and women owned. We deployed more than $2 million to families facing housing uncertainty. And this was all accomplished remotely because of our digital transformation. And the digital transformation was made possible not because of Diamonte, it was made possible because we had the right people on the bus that understood the vision and were working with me to ensure that we were able to make that leap. So that was very, very important, very, very critical. That $5 million of economic relief was not in the URA's 2020 budget. We did not believe that we would deploy $5 million outside of what we had earmarked to the business community. We had to look internally and we had to make sacrifices and, sort of start pulling together some of the dollars that we use for rainy day. And that was a tough decision, but it was the right decision to make because our small business community needed us. And so we decided to double down on investing in people in place while we've evolved into this notion of being a learning organization. You'll see there in the upper right-hand quadrant, we had a cohort of folks go through this PMP training on how to redevelop systems for the URA. A lot of those faces that you see also help with the digital transformation. So you can see there where investing in your people preventatively allowed us to have a core team that could help us with the digital migration. We invested money in the Cocopreneur campaign to help Black businesses that were harmed during the riots in Pittsburgh. And then we also, used, I think it was the month of June or July, I'm not sure when the training happened, but we did a training to help our staff to understand how to deal with the LGBTQ community around mental health and housing. What better time to be able to have those tools, that skill set while folks were facing a housing crisis. And then last, certainly but not least, fostering the spirit of entrepreneurship in our small business community while we've been facing COVID-19. And so really the thing here has been it comes from the fifth discipline, which is the art and practice of a learning organization. If your organization is not learning, it's dissolving, it's on its way out of business. And so the URA did great work, but it did not have a culture of learning and wanting to figure out how to do the next big thing or the next best thing. And so we all had to work together to position the organization for resiliency and growth. Make that transition from public administration to public enterprise. It requires me learning new skills. This is also me trying to, become a better leader, better manager, and really sharpening my skills around engagement and systems management. And then the fact that it's human-centric is the hallmark of service. If human beings are not at the center of your service, then you're not really serving. And so we had to deepen the level of service and systems development in the organization to align with opportunities for public partnership investment. And so what's the result? So if you ask me, Diamonte, does this work? How do we have proof? So I will tell you this. At the August board meeting, it was announced that the PNC Foundation made a $10 million investment in the URA's work. I do not believe that the PNC Foundation would have invested in the URA's work in August of 2019. It was our ability to capture the moment and to show up for our community that allowed us to make a clarion call to our business community to step in and get all hands on deck and support us and support the work that we do on behalf of communities. So that's a $6.5 million recovery loan fund that was developed, $2.5 million invested in our new CDFI, which is called Invest PGH, and $1 million into the Catapult Minority Business Incubator Program. Again, unprecedented investment for the URA but for the ability for all of us to collectively lead, that would not have happened. And so last but not least is communication. And so none of this makes sense if you're not able to effectively communicate and connect with your employees. And so really looking at crucial conversations as the benchmark for how to handle communicative leadership. Communication adaptations are very necessary in the 21st century. We're all distracted by digital permanence. You know, I've got my cell phone here, text messages are going off. I'm sure that you guys are trying to multitask while you're listening to this, but to be an effective persuader, you got to create win-win scenarios. A lot of the programs that were developed that set the stage for the URA's current investments required me to persuade somebody who was in power at the URA at the time that it made sense to develop a microloan program for minority and women-owned businesses. That was not something that was obvious to the URA to do back in 2018. Well, our emergency loan recovery program is essentially the microloan program with a twist. And so had that existing program not been there, we would not have been able to have what I now call a win-win situation. Body language is the most powerful transmitter of information. It will say the things that your mouth is not saying. Communication requires listening, open-mindedness, authentic attempts at building trust, and leaders must move in a manner that is commensurate with the speed of trust. I am a new leader at the URA. Folks have worked together for 20 and 30 years plus. They do not know me, and I have to move at a pace faster than the speed of trust. And this is why being human-centric is so important, because how are you going to get the buy-in if people don't know you and you're not familiar to them? And so one of the ways that I've done this is, if you know me, I'm unfiltered, I'm unbiased, but I am very, very understanding. And so I always encourage leaders to be willing to have the tough conversations, be eager to understand counterpoints of view, but don't take no mess from anybody, and be able to move from discussion to action. People don't want to hear us talk about things. They want us to actually do things, and be interested in creating win-win outcomes. It's not okay for Diamonte to get her way and somebody else, you know, wasn't heard or wasn't felt. How can we work together to make it a win-win? And then there has to be a lifetime commitment to learning and reading while leading. And so I am going to share here my Twitter handles. My LinkedIn. I would love to stay connected with you guys and continue this conversation. And so now we are going to exit the labyrinth, and I'm going to allow you guys to ask me anything.
Thank you so much, Diamonte. And as Diamonte just said, so this is a time right now for all of us to connect and ask questions to her. So if you don't mind, I'm going to get started the questions, but feel free to either send it on the chat box or, you know, unmute yourself and ask questions. But Diamonte, again, thank you for an amazing and so insightful information and presentation. I definitely kept me energized and learned a lot from this hour, from this 45 minutes actually. But I wanted to hear a little bit more about sort of like, tell us about a little bit about self-care and why it's important to practice, and especially right now that we're living in an environment where we have a social justice uprising going on and a global pandemic. What are your self-care practices, and, you know, what can you share with us?
That's a really great question. I knew you were going to answer that. I knew you were going to ask me that. So one thing that I believe in is sleep justice. So I work really hard. Sometimes I work 14, 16-hour days trying to do some of the things that you saw on that presentation. And that means that on a Sunday, if you're looking for me, I've probably been asleep for 8 hours between 1 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Like, I'm going to get the sleep that I know that I deserve in order to do this work. So that's one thing. It's lots and lots and lots of sleep. Other things that I do, I mean, I'm a meditator. I meditate, I pray a lot. I read a lot, and, you know, I try to eat well, drink enough water. And I also try to, you know, I mean, I spend a lot of time with my family, spend a lot of time with people who really know me, who know more about the authentic side, not the side that, you know, has to, you know, always be on. To be completely honest with you, you have to be able to turn it off sometimes, and being able to have a family that I can do that with really, really helps. And, you know, I mean, I've been started going to the chiropractor, because when you're sitting at this computer all day, you start getting tight in certain places. And I keep telling folks I'm an aging millennial. So that's, you know, that's starting to kick in. And so been going to the chiropractor, and, you know, and really just, and I'll tell you what, I'm gonna be honest with you, COVID-19 has been very, very stressful, but being able to wake up in the morning and spend time with my daughter. It has been so, and my children, has been so restorative. So I can work very hard, but I have them right with me, and we're able to have all these conversations and discussions and learn things about one another that I didn't have the opportunity to do when I'm spending most of my time at 412 Boulevard of the Allies, and then just kind of waiting until the weekends to connect. And so now we can connect. So I've just been maximizing this time of being remote. I've not been in my office since March 17th. So everything that you guys saw happened like right from where I'm sitting right now. And so that has been restorative, as using COVID-19 as a break.
Great. Thank you so much. That definitely family time is really important, and just taking, I also believe in sleep a lot too. Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to take some questions from the chat box. We have one from Christine Ferguson. How many members of the entrepreneurial community and citizens with business experience in Pittsburgh become active supporters of the URA's mission?
That is a great question, and I'm so happy that you asked that. So one of the things that I think is very effective in looking at, especially supporting the business community, is mentorship opportunities, and especially in this digital environment, connecting with folks. And I keep hearing a lot of entrepreneurs saying, you know, my time is money. You want to have a conversation with me, you got to pay me. It's going to be more than a cup of coffee. And I really want to encourage folks to kind of relax on that a little bit. I mean, people should absolutely be paid for their time, but creating other entrepreneurs it helps all business owners, right? We need a strong business community. So being willing to talk to folks and share information with folks. We have a network of technical assistance providers. We're always looking for folks willing to come on and help folks complete microloan applications, helping them with cash flow statements, and just business strategizing in general. So if you would be interested in helping to support the URA's mission, you have my email address. Please reach out to me. I'd love to sit and talk with you. And again, like I said, I think the best ideas come from other people. So if somebody has ideas, I'd be really interested to listen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Nadili, I think, had a question. Do you want to jump in and ask, Nadili?
Yeah, I was also writing a second one, but I'll start with the first one. So my question to you is, what are you currently working on as a leader? And also, I feel like there are things about ourselves that we realize is very difficult to change, and so instead we learn ways to work with what we have. So one thing is that you're working on, and the other thing is something you've accepted about yourself that you found ways to work around.
Sure. So I will say the first one would be, so if I look at those domains, like I'm very strong in some and I'm not as strong in others. And I really I'm an introvert. So cultural relational is always going to be a real challenge for me. You know, when I engage deeply and I engage meaningfully. And so sometimes surface level interaction, and be very transparent for you, is not very easy for me. And so but that's a part of the job. That's something that you've got to be able to do. And so that's something that I continue to work on. And, you know, being on Zoom doesn't help. it really, you know, you have to make the best of it, but it really doesn't help. But I have a deep, deep inner life. And so sometimes for me, coming outside of that deep inner life that I love so much, to engage outwardly that can sometimes be my challenge. So that's something that I continue to work on and that I continue to refine, if I'm completely honest with you. And then your other question was, can you repeat the second part of the question?
The second part of the question was, what is something that you've accepted that will not change, and so you're working through it? Oh, and it sounds like you power through, let's say, you being introverted and having to work through Zoom.
Yeah, that's fine. The other challenge is that I'm a direct communicator, and so not everybody is equipped to deal with the direct communicator. Direct communicators, people can say, oh, they're mean, or oh, and it's just like, no, I am emotionally efficient when it comes to talking about the things that need to be done. And people can sometimes, I think, misconstrue that. And so just being mindful of, and so I see Nancy Furby on the call here today. And so if you don't know Nancy Furby, you absolutely should. She did something called the DISC assessment. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but that DISC assessment changed my life, because it tells you whether or not you're a more dominant personality. Are you more conscientious? Are you more, you know, are you an influencer? Are you stable? And so really understanding, of course, I understand my own communication language, but learning the communication language of others and making that adaptation is actually something that I enjoy as a direct communicator. And just learning about how other people receive and need to hear information. The folks on my team are very different than me. we're not all the same. And I know, and some folks are really, really strong. They're like, she communicates like a direct communicator and I like it. And other people are like, do you think she's mad at me? You know, so that's something that I definitely have to balance. But I think that's a part of the game, and it's a part of growing and developing as a professional.
Thank you. And I think Nancy had a question.
So I do have a question, but I will say one of my favorite stories about DISC and Diamonte is when her new boss shows up in town, and I sat down with him and did his DISC, and we walked down to the HR head of HR's office, and Diamonte happened to be there, and she was able to guess where her new boss was on the DISC circle, and she was really close, and I was like, "She just started soon. That's awesome." So, and I think it impressed him that it really does make sense in the business world.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So thank you, Nancy, for giving us those. So again, Nancy, she's the kind of consultant that we brought to the URA to build emotional intelligence throughout the organization. That's something else that's been very, very important. We want to practice radical candor, and and so that's been super helpful. So thank you for that.
So I also wanted to ask a question too. So you showed us all of your books, and I thank you so much for that. Some of them are on my bookshelf, and I feel like I need to go back and read them. And I used to read a lot when I was on my elliptical. And because of our new world, I tend to go outside, walk my dog, because I just need to get outside of the house. So I don't find myself working out in the old way I used to. So how do you motivate yourself? How do you find the time to read, and how do you pick what you want to read next?
Great question. So I actually read a lot of books through Audible. So if in my car, I'm not listening to music, I have an audio book on. So, and it was actually really, I could finish a book like in a month almost, because I'm going to work and coming back. That was pretty much when I could listen to it. But I downloaded Audible on my TV. I don't watch a whole lot of TV. I use my TV screen time to listen to books and to get that information and that knowledge. So that's how I make time for my reading. I also have my Kindle app front and center on my screen, and not my Facebook and social media apps, so that I can go to the Kindle app more than I go to the social media and replace scrolling time with reading time. That's one way. And then the way that I pick, books, a lot of it has been just through my academic pursuits. Has brought a lot of these books on my radar. Going through a leadership program at Point Park, a lot of those books stems from the curriculum there. Some of them are things that I've picked up, from lists like Goodreads, like tell me more about these kind of books that I like to read. And then I'm also always asking people, like I don't ask people what they do, I ask people what do they read. I don't care about what you do and what your title is. I can tell a lot about you by what you're actively reading.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you so much. And we have maybe like about some time for two to three questions. So we have one, let's see, from Ebony. It says, how do you feel about the future of public service?
Well, I think that we're all going to be public servants in the future. I don't care who you are. Corporate social responsibility is going to be an extension of public service. And so I think that we're not going to be able to tackle our problems with a one-trick pony. The URA and the public sector can't do it all. The private sector can't do it all. The nonprofit sector can't do it all. It really is going to have to be a confluence of people thinking about more than just themselves and their own ascent to power. So I think there's a bright future for public service. Listen, funding sources are dwindling down. Funding sources are like the URA is really dealing with, we want to do everything. We want to be there for everybody. The economic reality is that we can't. We have to prioritize and we have to focus. And that's why that PNC investment becomes so critical, because it does a match for match on the public dollars that we have. So now it's not just taxpayers on the hook to advance the URA's mission. Now we have the private sector showing up to say that work is important, our community is important, and I'm just encouraging more folks to think like that. So my answer to that is that we're all public servants now.
Great, awesome, thank you. And then we have one more question from Bob. It says about, like how could we be able to better network during these times right now?
So I actually think that what you've done, Anya and Natalia, I think that it's very smart using Zoom and having the elevator music kind of play. Well, it's more than elevator music, it's pretty nice, but being able to connect people in that way. And I like that we didn't just jump on and I just started talking like Diamonte is going to present. Like these folks had some time to talk to one another and connect. I think that using the chat in these functions to connect with people and privately messaging people is a really good tool. And then we can't really be in physical proximity now, so I've just been encouraging people to look at the information that's out there in the business community and hop on those calls, and then more importantly, create your own calls in your own communities. Use these digital tools to create communities. Everybody, the things that you're feeling and experiencing, I bet you somebody else is too. So you can also be a leader in starting to create these spaces and not just looking for other people to create them.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think we definitely have to be resourceful in regards to, how do we take advantage of what we have and connecting with people and, getting coffee and things like that. I think a lot of people have gotten creative, but, I think I can see how there is a learning curve, but eventually, the more we practice, the better we will get to connecting virtually and keeping up on meeting new people. And then Nadili had one more question. Nadili, do you wanna ask?
Yeah, so I'd like to kind of, I wonder if you agree. I think a part of being a good leader is also being heavily self-aware. And to be self-aware is beyond who you are with your teammates, but who you are growing up, how your communication style has been influenced by your parents, your upbringing. And so how much of that do you believe in that? And how can we encourage people to create or do some of that self-discovery?
I am a huge proponent of self-awareness. I think that sometimes we just walk around haphazardly, not really connecting with ourselves, because the easiest thing to do is to look and analyze other people. It's very difficult to look within and face some of those realities. And so that's the reason why I recommended the True North book and the notion of authenticity, because you have to be able to process your own stories in a way where you can own them and you don't feel shamed by them, and you can use them not only in your leadership or professional practice, but in cultivating who you are as a person. And so, I had a really tough childhood. Like my childhood was not an easy childhood. It was tough, and I had a lot of things that I had to overcome and that I had to navigate. But you can't intimidate me because I come from the Hill District. They're like, how do you get in a meeting? And it's like, do you know what I've lived through, what I've been through, and what I've witnessed? This does not scare me or intimidate me. We've got bigger things to handle. And so, I do try to be self-aware. I think we all get in our blind spots, but I think the thing with self-awareness is keep honest people around you. Don't keep people around you that sing in the amen choir all day, every day. Like, you need people around you that are going to go, you missed the mark on that. You could have done, and I want to say this to you, and I want to say this to you in love, and be able to receive that. That's the key thing about self-awareness, because then what happens is you can start to check yourself and say, yeah, that's a problem.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you so much. It is 5 o'clock now, and so we're coming to the end of the event today.
Thank you.
I wanted to say thank you again, for Diamonte, for your honest talk and for sharing so much with us, and for being so open. I think you are a leader in our community, and it's just really great to have you be so accessible and share your time with us today. Please make sure to connect with us at some point. Check out our website to check out for next events. And again, thank you, Diamonte, and round of applause for Diamonte.